All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hi, everybody. This is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks weekly podcast. We will go without a Newmarkers Newsmakers this week. We're going to go right into our interview. I had a great conversation with Motassem Serhan. He is the CEO of Elixir Medical. Motassem has been involved in the vascular space for over 2 decades. He was at Guidant, involved with stent design there, co-founded a company, Aventec, sold that, and then founded Elixir in 2005. Elixir has been at this for a while, but he's got a great arrangement with the Invis Group investors, and he is convinced that Elixir is developing the next iteration of devices, of implants that will be used to help previously occluded vessels remain open. So we obviously talked about that later in the podcast. Earlier in the podcast, we talked a great deal about his career, what led him to medtech, how he initially started in the stent space, some opportunities that were presented to him that maybe were initially daunting, but he took on the challenge, and look where he is today. So lots of great lessons for folks in varying parts of their medtech career. So I'm grateful for Motassem for taking the time and for sharing his stories. Before we begin, I did want to remind you that DeviceTalks West is happening on October 18th and 19th. We will be kicking off the 2-day event with an interview with Julie Tyler. She is Senior Vice President at Abbott and head of the vascular group. So speaking of vascular, looking forward to that conversation with her to understand where Abbott is headed in this space. Of course, we'll have keynotes from Imperative Care, from Intuitive, from Johnson & Johnson MedTech, and a lot of great participation from Stryker, Boston Scientific, Medtronic, Dexcom, Abbott, Moon Surgical, and many, many more. So lots of great companies will be presenting there. Looking forward to having our West Coast DeviceTalks contingent represented there. We had a great time at DeviceTalks Boston. We packed that house, and I'm looking forward to doing that at the Santa Clara Convention Center as well. So you still have time to secure our early bird rate. It is $395. You're not going to get a better deal for a healthcare conference of this quality. We'll have senior leaders there from every aspect of medical device industry. So it'll be a great opportunity for you to not only improve your skill sets, but to expand your networks. So go to DeviceTalks.com. You don't need any special codes. You register now. You'll get it for $395. It's $300 less than the full price. So definitely worth committing now. It's going to be a great 2 days. I would love to see you there, and I would love to see you save $300. So again, go to DeviceTalks.com to register for DeviceTalks West, which is happening on October 18th and 19th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. All right, with all that said, last message, please join us this Tuesday. It'll be our last DeviceTalks Tuesdays of the summer. We'll pick it up again in late August, which I know is technically still summer, but it's closer to Labor Day, so we'll say it's inching toward the fall. But please join us on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Go to DeviceTalks.com for information about that great program. It'd be great to see you there as well. All right, let us get this conversation going. Once again, I spoke with Motassem Serhan, CEO of Elixir Medical. Well, Motassem Serhan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's going to be exciting to catch up on Elixir's story and I think more broadly cover the state of vascular support, drug-eluting stents, whatever we want to call them. I know you have a different term for your product. But before we get into that space where you've had a lot of experience, I'd love to find out what your first job was in medtech and what drew you to that job. I know you ultimately worked at Guidant, and I'm sure you'll say wonderful things about Guidant because everybody does. But what drew you to the medtech sector?
What drew me to the medtech sector is I grew up with a keen sense of curiosity about the human anatomy and physiology. And I really wanted to understand more about it. And I thought the path to do that is through to become a surgeon. And then later on, I found out that there is actually an engineering discipline called biomedical engineering that you can actually develop and innovate with so many different devices and means to improve patients' outcomes. And I decided to, instead of becoming a surgeon, to go through the discipline of biomedical engineering and became a biomedical engineer. And
Interesting.
my first job, yeah,
Was your interest in surgery, was it the technical, the almost like a craftsman sort of, I want to do this and fix that? Or was there, I imagine there was some, I wanted to do good and help people as well built into that. But what was the primary driver?
it was the ability to go into a patient body and investigate what is going on there and being able to fix it. And when I discovered you could do that with a lot more different ways of doing it on the device side, enabling surgeons at the time, because interventional cardiology was not a mainstream yet, I thought that is a lot more interesting approach to doing it.
This isn't just a cover story because organic chemistry was so hard.
I actually, the funny part is I took organic chemistry, I took anatomy, I took a lot of the pre-med
Oh, wow. Okay.
courses, and it was an eye opener. I still remember the first day where I took anatomy, and I thought it went well until I went to the cafeteria to have lunch, and I could not eat. I could not eat for a few days. And then you starve, and then life goes on, and you eat.
So you settled while in college on a biomedical track?
Yes, I actually did a dual degree undergraduate, biomedical electrical engineering. And I went first to Purdue, and it was in the double E division. And at that time, biomedical was an interdisciplinary major. It did not have its own department. It was either under mechanical, electrical, or chemical. So I studied there for 2 years, and then I moved to USC, where I did dual degree major in biomedical electrical. And my first master's was in engineering management. And then I went to University of Texas Southwestern and UT Arlington, a joint program, master's in biomedical engineering. And then I said, that's enough. It's been 6 years, and now it's time to do the real thing.
I know everything there is to know. Just a little personal note: I'll be in West Lafayette, Indiana next month, dropping my son off at Purdue for his freshman year, so in the engineering program.
There was an amazing restaurant there.
Tell me,
a Greek restaurant that had the best Greek food. If it's there, it is worth going and stopping by and enjoying.
You'll have to tell me afterwards. We'll definitely go looking for it. So fantastic. So, what was your first career opportunity in medical devices?
My first career opportunity was working for a company called Advanced Cardiovascular System. It's one of these early pioneering and interventional cardiology companies. The environment there was incredible. Entrepreneurial spirit, teamwork, hard work. The leadership was fully engaged, visible, accessible. And so it's the best possible outcome for someone coming out of college to experience these amazing experiences. And after my first year, I realized this is the area that I want to continue my career throughout my career with, which is the cardiovascular. There's about 200 million patients that have coronary heart disease in the world, and the opportunity to make an impact in their lives would be tremendous. And I decided that's what I wanted to do.
I'd have to think that there's, I never really considered it before, but the vascular space it has a lot of interesting qualities to it, in that you're dealing with sort of a known structure within the body. It's more of a physical challenge, perhaps, than a biological challenge. And maybe I'm dumbing that down too much. But is there a unique? What did you find that you liked about the vascular system, and is it different from other medical device systems or specialties that are out there?
So if you look at what is intervention in general is, it's using the body arteries and veins as conduits to reach to the target organ that you're trying to fix. And usually the fixing is either opening up an occlusion or patching a hemorrhage. And as a result of that, you're able to pick and select an artery that would lead to the heart. So instead of having the invasive open heart surgery that is extremely invasive to a patient, interventional cardiology, you snake this long tube that has a balloon on it, and you're able to go through the body and get into the area of the heart that is occluded. With X-ray, you'll be able to see that area, and you inflate that balloon. By expanding that balloon, you're able to reestablish the blood flow to that segment that has been deprived of blood flow. And then later on, the technology evolved to having stents where you put essentially a corrugated tube, expanding it by inserting it on top of that balloon, holding that artery to be open to resume blood flow. And that was remarkable. The market grew from 500,000 patients at one point to over 5 million patients today by being able to address resumption of blood flow to the vessel that is deprived from blood.
It is interesting how innovation sort of begets innovation, where you had the interventional tools, the balloons, and that led to, well, we'll need the stents, and then we need the drug-eluting stents, and then we'll go on and on and on. So it's been quite an evolution to follow, and you've had a front row seat. Ultimately, you got over to Guidant. I'm trying to remember, was that an acquisition of?
So Advanced Cardiovascular System was part of Eli Lilly. In the past,
Right.
Several of these early interventional companies were part of pharmaceutical companies, and they were divested out. And in the case of ACS, was divested out and became public in 1995 as a Guidant corporation. And what Guidant encompassed was the interventional cardiology piece, as well as the CRM or cardiac rhythm management piece. And it grew and made inroads in patient care and in inventing and developing medical devices to advance patient outcomes. I was involved in the R&D side, where I had the fortune to develop 3 of the balloon catheters that became the top-selling catheters for the company and around the world. And I was fortunate to develop the first stent implant for the company, the multi-link stent, taking it all the way to commercial release outside the US. So the experiences I've had were tremendous in the fact that I was able to see the progression of evolution of these technologies. But if you look at it, Tom, all of that focus was resuming blood flow to a tube. The world was looking at these vessels as a conduit only to conduct blood flow. What the world was missing is that this is an alive organ. It pulsates. It has chemical exchanges back and forth with the blood. And when you just put a stent there, you're rendering that vessel to become further deteriorated in terms of its function.
Yeah, I don't know if there probably is, but another area within medtech where every innovation was countering the body's response to the implant that was the previous generation of the implant. It seemed as if it was just a constant course correction with vascular tools. Does that happen in other specialties, or do you think it's been unique to vascular?
It does. It does. And I think as you introduce a device or an intervention, it usually has side effects. And what you do in the next generation is you reiterate, like for instance, with stents, bare metal stents, by incorporating an mTOR inhibitor or an anti-proliferative, you're able actually to reduce the amount of scarring as a result of the injury that stent does to the body. And therefore, you reduce the amount of neointimal hyperplasia that takes place. I do believe other areas as well, they develop additional or modified technologies to address shortcomings of previous technologies. In this case, by adding or incorporating a drug on the bare metal stents, you're able to enhance effectiveness in the first year of that implant.
And given that you had a front row seat at the design and indeed a hand in the design of the bare metal stents, and now with the benefit of 2020 or more hindsight, do you look back and say we should have understood like that would have been the body's response to the stents, or was the feeling at the time like this is the solution, this is the final version, or was there a belief that this is a generational step?
The funny part is that when we were just doing balloon angioplasty with 30% stenosis or re-occlusion in the first year, the world and the industry thought that was it. It was the maximum possible. I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
And then when comes stents and the market grew by 3-4 times, the world also thought that, wow, you reduced it from 30% now to 15%. That is it. And then, if you remember in business school, you have these S curves where you have the growth part and then the maturity part, and then the next S curve comes and takes it to the next potential for it, which is much larger than the previous. But until then, you would think that this is the best thing in town. And then you comes with drug-eluting stents, where Johnson & Johnson, with their drug-eluting stent, demonstrated you can actually reduce it to under 10%. And now the world is in awe again. And at the time, you always think that this is it until the next disruptive technology comes along.
Right. That's fascinating. I guess that's what makes it so much fun. So you're at Guidant. You led the designs or the releases of the RX Perfusion PTCA catheter, and I'm looking at your bio.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the PET, is it PET balloon technology? I should know these. This is like before I really started. I used to read these and I never had to say them. Like, is it PET or is it PET?
It's PET.
Okay.
So the first project was RX and perfusion merged together, and it was a tough project. That was the first time where I got to know what a patent is, what an invention is, by being able to reduce the profile in a unique way. That was the way I found out what a patent was. When I was told, by the way, this is an invention, and it's a serious invention, and you're going to have a patent in your name on that. The next one was the company for 7 years. We're trying to have a PET balloon, which is a very thin type of balloon that tend to perforate very easily. And therefore, they're not reliable to get into patients, because the last thing you want is get into patient and they have a hole in that balloon. And so they created a heavyweight team at the time. I was summoned to the vice president of R&D. I was told, out of all the people in the company, your name is on the top of the list that you could do this. We need it in 1 year, and we need it to be done, and you would go pick your team. And I did pick the right team. We were about 5-6 core team. As a heavyweight, all of the disciplines report through the project leader, and at the time it was myself. And we actually were able to commercialize the first PET balloon, high pressure balloon, for the company, and very, very, very exciting time at the time.
Forgive me for asking this, but how old were you at this time?
So
almost 30 years ago?
No. Yes, I was in my 20s, 22, 23.
Wow.
And that was not after the first few programs. I used to get to turn about 1 or 2 projects, 1 a year approximately. I would get summoned to the vice president office with a specific mandate, which was a very difficult mandate, and execute it, commercialize it, and then I would get a reward with a promotion. And then the next something with another request. The next one would be a multi-leg stent. It would be the first implant for the company. And the rigor and discipline that I have with the team that I run is to be able to have the first implant for Guidant. And that was a big deal, because we wanted to make everything goes well and no excuses. And we delivered on that as well.
Is there any part of you, or do you recall any part of you being, I'm just a kid? Like, how am I being put in touch? Can I do this project? Or did you have no doubt that you were the right person?
No. There are times where I am terrified. Like the first time I was called, I was an engineer called into the vice president, which is 2 to 3 levels above who I'm reporting to, telling me, you'll be on my staff, and this is what I need from you. I actually turned it down. My eyes and my mind wanted to do advanced development. So it's okay, go and do your advanced development. And then I was talking to a friend of mine. He said, you are crazy. The vice president of R&D telling you you're going to be on his staff and he wants something from you. You get that done, and then you go to your advanced development another time. And so I called him, Michael Clayman, his name, a week later, said, is the job still open? He said, yes. So when I started, I was terrified, because, it's something that the company has not been able to put out for 7 years, and it's not trivial. And then you have to get up and brush that concern and do it.
Get it done.
And once you get it done, you get the confidence to do something further.
That's amazing. So you ultimately would leave Guidant to start your own company, Aventec Vascular. What went into that thought process? What was the timing of that, by the way?
It was in 2000.
Okay.
I worked for ACS at Guidant, which is the same company, for 10 years straight, growing through the ranks of R&D, reporting to the president before leaving. And at that time, the technology has matured in terms of offering. And I wanted to dream something much bigger in order to address the needs of, we're still as an industry small, and it cannot be that's all what it's about. So I left with not knowing exactly what I'm doing, but I wanted to know that I wanted to make an impact in interventional cardiology. What I started doing is developing advanced technology that can bring us in some revenue in order to offset part of the expenses, because most of the investors that I thought were going to come in and back the company disappeared. So it was a painful experience to go through, but it was enlightening. I mean, the experience in terms of business, entrepreneurship, innovation, again, terrifying. But every time I find myself in a comfort zone over time, I kick myself out of that comfort zone. And then I say, why did I do that? In this case, it was a big, hairy, audacious goal. We ended up working towards doing an advanced drug delivery from a stent, with the goal of actually developing a bioresorbable scaffold in order to remove that whole implant later on and be able to free that vessel in order to reach higher grounds. And sometime in the first 2.5 years of the company's life, one of the manufacturers that was also distributing our product in Japan, Goodman, decided that the company had enough products to become the core of their business in Japan. They made us an offer to acquire, with the understanding that they'll allow us to innovate and grow the company to be able to address some of these unmet needs beyond the immediate product offerings.
And this was the time, the 2000, 2003. It was not a great time for fundraising or really exits. I mean, there was no IPO window to speak of. M&A was sporadic. So that's certainly a comforting outcome to have a company recognize its value.
It was one of the biggest exits in medical devices at the time.
Yeah, but it was 150 or so, 160?
165 million.
And at the time, that seemed like a big deal. Now, I don't think it would register as high on our seismic
Absolutely.
scale, but back then it was certainly a healthy exit.
It was a very healthy exit. And after the acquisition of the company, they changed their mind. Well, Goodman was acquired by Nipro, and now it's Nipro, which has a market leadership position. It's a very impressive company in Japan. But at the time, they've changed their mind from making it a global to just focus on Japan.
Oh, okay.
And that's when I retired from Avant.
And then how long did it take you to found Elixir? Not very long.
So it took me about a year. I thought that is what retirement's supposed to be. And you would think someone could be happy with that. For me, it was the most difficult time in my life. That's probably the first time where I kind of knew what a depression would feel or look like, because the amount of unhappiness I was in was tremendous. I'm a builder, I'm an innovator, and I like to do things that are meaningful. And so philanthropic is wonderful, boards are wonderful, but it's not as exciting as building and making a difference in a day-to-day life of patients. So my investors, the Invest Group, were sending me during that time term sheets to come back. And the goal is to disrupt the entire industry. And that is big, hairy, audacious goal, as you can imagine. And finally, a year later, I said, enough is enough. There is no retirement. I don't think I'll ever retire in my life. I say this now. And I came back into it.
Invest was your backer for Eventech, and they're your backer now for Elixir. How would you classify or characterize or describe that relationship? Is it they're your sole investor? I mean, it sounds great from some perspective. You're not having to go out there fundraising, but are there challenges too? How do you describe the relationship?
It's the most amazing relationship any entrepreneur or leadership team can ever dream about. And I genuinely, sincerely say that, and I'll walk you why. Their model, it's an evergreen fund, and they like to have a major impact in industries, not incremental impact. And they're patient. They're very patient and so the structure is usually aligned. You have to have a skin in the game. So I co-invested with them to find Elixir. So they don't just invest on their own, but for me as a founder and CEO, I had to put a significant amount of my wealth into the company.
Oh, okay.
And everything is aligned in the relationship. And therefore, there is no disconnect in any way. It is 100% alignment. And the goal is a big goal. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal. The remarkable thing about them is it's not through good times. When we went through rough times, and every company goes through that, that's when you see the true character. And that's when their support is unwavering.
Do you think, and I think I know the answer to this, but if had you been backed by more traditional VCs with a 10-year partnership and a window where they need to produce some results, do you think you'd still be running Elixir today? Or is it because you had this unique relationship with Invis?
I did not have to think about anything other than creating value and disrupting. I
That
did
sounds
not
great.
have to worry about whether some of the board members on the table are interested to harvest their investment and sell it maybe to get a 3x or this X or whatever that is. I only focused on that. And when you want to transform an industry, the path is not as straightforward. There's ups and downs, and Invis, with their evergreen fund and visionary leader, they specialize in doing so, and they you don't have to think twice about that. So typical VCs generally are looking for a shorter horizon for the return and more incremental type innovation to disrupt an entire industry with 5 million people being treated in one way, and you're eyeing a 200 million patients to be able to make an impact in them is nothing short of a mission impossible. And as you know well, Abbott, with their bioresorbable, invested several $billions in that. The whole world was looking at what's next and how we can do that. Elixir was one of them as well. And Elixir was just behind Abbott in terms of that development with a remarkable product offering, but it had shortcomings and it was not going to disrupt or transform the industry. We tripled down on that innovation path, and Invis, when everyone else decided to exit or do something else, wrote a $50 million check and said, we had a deal, go do what we agreed to. And it's unheard of.
That's amazing. So let's talk about, this is a great time to talk about your system. So dynamic drug-eluting coronary bioadapter system. Talk a bit about the technology. I understand it sounds like a stent, but I understand it's not a stent, and you can tell me why.
So to give you a little bit of a background, stents cage that tube. And again, when you think of that tube, it's an alive organ that beats, that has compliance, have adaptive flow. If you need more as you're running, that vessel expands, you get more blood flow. And then you have the back and forth communication with the blood, with chemicals, with drugs. And that is very important for the health of that vessel. All the technologies to date were either caging that vessel or causing it to re-narrow again. But we're not really concerned about the health of the vessel. Bioresorbable scaffold technology came to try and address that and failed because it could not acutely have the same effectiveness as the standard of care of drug-eluting stents. And it failed in randomized trials to show that it actually resumes that functionality of the vessel. So with the Dynamics bioadapter, when we pivoted in around 2016, we wanted a no compromise where you are reestablishing the blood flow to the vessel, but you are able to restore the full functionality of that diseased vessel. Even though it's diseased, we want its ability to pulsate, its ability to have no compliance mismatch, its ability to adapt for flow if you need more flow, and being able to allow you to access the next evolution of effectiveness beyond anything reached to that stage.
So in 2016, when you pivoted toward this approach, were you back at square one? Did you go back to the drawing board, or was this a secondary program that you had in the back burner that you moved to the front burner and you already had a vision of what you wanted it to be?
We always at Elixir have 3 backup plans. So we have our plan A, plan B, and plan C. Dynamics was already invented at that time during BRS, knowing the shortcomings of BRS and knowing that it's not going to carry us forward. We tried our hardest to resolve all of these issues, but they continued. But the learning that we learned that you can actually, what you need the strength for is the first 3 months. Beyond that, the vessel needs its own space, its own movement, its own function. And therefore, we learned that from the BRS. We learned the technologies of the polymers. We learned the stents from our classic DS that we commercialized to offset some of our expenses. When you add them together, we focused on the unlocking and of the implant itself to uncage that vessel. And therefore, a lot of those technologies that we've developed over the years were so critical for us to incorporate so that we can focus on the one variable of unlocking a metallic, which is the first time ever done in cardiology to unlock a metallic structure and not only unlock it, but maintain that support for that diseased vessel, unlike bioresorbable that goes away, unable to restore that diseased vessel is unable to restore its normal function. By being able to have sustained support after you unlock the vessel, we're able to achieve full restoration of the vessel function. It's remarkable. It was exciting. We did it on the bench. We did it modeling, animal studies, and the results were amazing.
So because this is a podcast, I just want to get detailed in the description of what we're talking about. I don't have an image of it here to draw from. So, I mean, the original metal stents were the metal cage straws that we put inside the blood vessel. Then that was changed to the drug-eluting, where that would be coated with the drug that would prevent the reaction from the vessel. Then you had the bioabsorbable, which would disappear within the vessel. What does this look like? It sounds like it's a hybrid of bare metal and bioresorbable.
In a way, it is a hybrid. You can look at it that way, but it's very thin strands, helical strands that are
almost like a spring.
Joined. It's like a spring, but are joined circumferentially temporarily. So they are axially connected. Circumferentially, they are connected only temporarily by a thin polymer.
Okay.
That polymer is resorbed in 6 months, allowing those 3 intertwined strands to unlock. These are embedded in tissue by that time, and the tissue allows, with the pulsation, that these strands to become offset or uncage, and therefore allowing, from a circumferential point of view, the full restoration of the vessel motion and function. Whereas stents and drug-eluting stents are a cage that you put into the blood vessel, and it freezes that blood vessel because it does not allow it to move, pulsate appropriately. It's a nidus for all the events as a result of its presence. Yes, it's restored blood flow, but then it takes a toll on rendering the vessel dysfunctional over time, that you have 2 to 3% annual non-plateauing event rates over time. So 1 out of 5 patients in 5 years have a major adverse cardiac event, and 1 out of 2 patients in 10 years have a major adverse cardiac events that have a drug-eluting stents in their artery. So it's a big deal where 50% of the patients who receive stents have an event in which they have to do something else about it. It's not trivial. It's an unmet need. It's a huge unmet need. And Elixir really dedicated its existence on making sure that we upgrade that standard of care for patients around the world.
So how is this system, since it's not connected anymore and it's not a structure, able to provide that support? I guess what I'm getting from this is this really only delivers the support and the therapy, for lack of a better word, for the first year or two, and then the feeling is you don't need that support anymore, or does it still provide that support to keep the vessel open?
2 different types of support. The first one is strength, where you really need it to be very strong, because you remember you're squashing all that plaque that have accumulated over tens of years. You're squashing it against the vessel wall, and you need to be able to get that to about 10% or less. After 3 months, the vessel remodels, and therefore the vessel itself doesn't need that cage to continue caging. Its presence actually becomes a nidus for events. And therefore, what you need is a safe mechanism to uncage and unlock the device. And that's where biology takes over. And biology is self-sufficient in healing its own self. But what is still needed, is that accumulated that you shoved against the vessel wall needs to be supported by a structure. So the bioadapter becomes a background in the tissue, supporting that disease that have accumulated over the years that you've compressed against the vessel wall, allowing you to resume the pulsatility as if it's a normal vessel and allowing the communication, inflow and outflow of that vessel to resume.
Interesting. Let's talk about the status of the state of the program. You've just this month, July, announced that you had enrollment. You completed enrollment in your Infinity Sweetheart trial, which is a prospective multi-center, single-blind, randomized clinical trial. How long has this been tested in humans, and what opportunity does this new trial that's just been enrolled represent?
So this is the fourth trial for Elixir on the bioadapter. It is the largest trial by far, 2,400 patients randomized 1-to-1 versus the standard of care in drug-eluting stents. And therefore, when you look at the meaning of that trial is continued evidence building. These type of trials, Tom, are trials that historically companies like Johnson & Johnson, Abbott, Boston Scientific, and Medtronic would run. Not a small company at the scale of Elixir would run.
Right.
But finding ourselves in an uncharted territory where strategics today decided to move on into other areas, we had to take on that responsibility and conduct trial after trial, building upon the successes of each one into where we are today. The first two trials were mechanistic trials, heavy on imaging to understand the mechanism, the safety, the effectiveness. And then we run the bioadapter trial, which was a European-Japanese trial that will be the basis for our approval in Japan, where we conducted 445 patients, randomized 1-to-1 versus the standard of care with DES, with 100 patients, large cohort of imaging. The finding of that trial were remarkable. We met the non-inferiority endpoint, and numerically, for the first time, a technology actually looking better than the standard of care. And when we look through imaging, I call it looking under the hood, looking at the engine, there's a day and night difference. One with the bioadapter, where the vessel is fully restored, its motion, function, and then finding a novel finding of plaque. As you may know, when you put an implant, you further degrade the vessel function. And as a result of that, the vessel ability to clear that plaque doesn't happen. On the contrary, you increase that plaque progression, which is the nidus for secondary heart attack and tertiary heart attack. And whereas what we found with the bioadapter in the bioadapter trial is that for the first time in history, we're able to show plaque stabilization and regression in the patients that are most at risk for secondary heart attack. And that is remarkable because it's synergistically for the first time working with pharmaceutical statins to elevate the procedure beyond either device or pharma. Mm-hmm. Together, you can elevate into another level. So the Infinity Sweetheart is further evidence building on what we found with the bioadapter in order to move the bioadapter into mainstream in terms of adoption, in terms of pushing it to becoming the standard of care for PCI.
How have you been involved or familiar at least with trials like these for a couple of decades now? How have the trials today, how are they different from those done 10 or 20 years ago? Is the advanced imaging and the other visualization abilities, does that change how these are done? Has it helped you collect information faster, help you prove or disprove a point faster than before?
The imaging is tremendous, and we believe the imaging for the future is here to stay, because when you treat someone with X-ray and you're just looking at them in 2D, you're just looking at the flow dynamics or mechanics of it. When you're looking at imaging, it gives you the morphology of the artery. It gives you what type of plaque you get. Is it lipid? Is it calcific? Is it what are the different, what is the size of that vessel? So it gives you insights into it to better treat and better outcome that will continue to evolve over the years in our mind. And that has been helpful because at 12 months with the bioadapter, with a 100-patient imaging cohort, when you look at the results, where the results are clearly superior, statistically superior in every category, including blood flow, including vessel restoration, including diameter stenosis at 12 months, including the plaque regression, where you have superiority in every one of these metrics over the standard of care at 12 months, gives you an incredible insight at what's coming. One platform is leaving an artery in a normal fashion despite the disease that it accumulated over the years. Another one is about to experience continuous significant events year after year.
How important is this data? Now, obviously, the data is necessary for regulatory improvement and for advancement, but for you, a lot of medical device startups, one of their scoreboards is raising capital. They know they're successful if other investors have come in and said, "We think you're doing great. We want to give you money. Your valuation's going up." Whatever. It's a way of measuring progress. You haven't really had that scoreboard until you're getting this clinical data, so it must be really, really encouraging and enlightening to sort of have this clinical data coming through and to have the results that you're seeing. Has it sort of changed the tone from the company? And was it hard previously to kind of keep moving forward without having any external affirmation?
In an uncharted territory alone, is very hard.
Yeah.
And there are times that you question yourself, and what grounds you is your mission, is to elevate for the sake of patients the standard of care. It really grounds you. We continued, and seeing our own progress was very reassuring. And our investors seeing it and continuing their support, our key opinion leaders feeling that it's remarkable. It is what Elixir is doing. Those network of individuals may not be the whole world, but allowed us to continue in these uncharted territory. Let me tell you where that means today. With the results that we are getting, it is opening our eyes to the 200 million patients that have cardiac disease, coronary artery disease. You have about 30 million plus individuals who have vulnerable plaque. These are patients who have plaque in their arteries, are going to end up having a heart attack or an event at some point. Well, the technology, we know statins, once you have that plaque to a certain degree, will reduce the amount of lipids going in, but it doesn't really remove the amount coming out because the vessel is no longer functioning well. With the dynamics bioadapter, we're able to show by restoring that normal vessel function, not only statins prevent less lipid to go in, but now the vessel can flush things out, what is called an efflux of that plaque. And we've showed that with the imaging that we've done with the bioadapter, opens a 30 million patient population that today are not treated with devices, are treated with statins, but not optimal. And now with the combination of both, now you can elevate the standard of care beyond anything. There's 9 million people today, every year, that die from heart attacks. It's the single largest cause of death in the world. And therefore, with the bioadapter platform, now you can potentially see an avenue to help. And we're looking at trial design in order to do standard of care of statins alone versus standard of care with dynamics. And the goal is to show superiority of that. That is one area. The second area of chronic angina patients, these patients who have disease, but take medications in order to relieve the symptoms, but the disease is still there. We believe that if you're able to restore vessel function in many of them, the microvascular dysfunction and the microvascular resistance that can cause some of the issues in terms of that angina in some of these patients can be addressable. And so we're very excited, the most excited we've been on the future of where the platforms are going and the impact it would have on patients.
Let's talk about the future a bit. So what does your path look like have you mapped out anything with the FDA? Do you have a sense of if things continue to go well, when you might have a commercial product?
Yes. So the product is approved outside the US. We're filing in Japan. We're filing in Japan this month. We'll have approval in Japan before end of next year. The US FDA, they've been gracious to allow us a smaller patient sample size of 750 as a result of having large body of evidence with the sweetheart of 2,400. And we anticipate starting that trial in Q1 24. It's a much smaller trial than the typical 1,800 to 2,000 that devices have to go in the US because of the large body of evidence that we're building. And so it's exciting for us. And it is equally exciting to see the new indications that the bioadapter opens beyond PCI.
Interesting. And final question, when the day comes that you're fully commercial, what do you think the likely outcome will be? Is this going to be a company that you're going to build out a global sales force and sell these products yourselves? I'm sure that's what you're prepared to do, but is it more likely that you're going to be acquired by one of these global companies that already has that infrastructure in place?
We're committed to doing the best thing we can do today independently. And our plans, our commercial plans in Japan, that will be direct in Japan, will be direct in Europe, and will be direct in the US. How that changes over time, we don't know. But today we're executing to be an independent company, making sure that the technology reaches globally patients around the world and upgrading the standard of care.
Where to sell? Do you think you'd last more than a year as retired, or you're a little older now? Maybe you're ready to take it easy, but maybe you're going to start another company.
It may be a topic of another discussion. We have 6 disruptive platforms under the umbrella of Elixir, and some of them are in cardiology, like the TRX, which we are either reducing or replacing oral antiplatelet therapy by incorporating it on the device itself. It's a breakthrough technology that we will release the results at TCT this year. And we have Lithics, which is a novel disruptive technology for calcium disruption to prepare the lesion. The 3 of these technologies, between the bioadapter, TRX, and Lithics, we believe that will lead as a company the technology and innovation for the next 10, 15 years to upgrade the standard of care for patients globally.
All right. Sounds like you've got plenty to keep you busy. So we don't have to worry about you getting bored.
I agree with you.
Excellent. Well, this has been a fantastic story. I really appreciate your frankness. You've seen a lot in this space, and we're going to see a lot more from Elixir Medical. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Tom, for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, that is a wrap. Thanks for joining us on the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. Connect with us on social media. You can follow DeviceTalks on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Tom, Salemi. You can follow Chris Newmarker, Chris as in a new marker. Please do subscribe to the DeviceTalks Podcast Network. You'll get future episodes of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast, as well as Intuitive Talks, Stryker Talks, Abbott Talks, Boston Scientific Talks, and we're working on some other great programs as well. So make sure you don't miss any future great medical device conversations. Subscribe to the DeviceTalks Podcast Network on any major podcast application. And finally, don't forget to register to attend DeviceTalks West October 18th and 19th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. Go to DeviceTalks.com, register now, save $300 off the final price. You'll get in for just $395. All right, folks, have a great weekend and week, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody.